just kind of recap it for people that haven't been coming for a while. We meet here every second Wednesday of the month, and open to the public, obviously. And we feature local professional developers, and we also have a session that we call a member project. That's for smaller projects. We've had game mods, we've had personal projects, interactive fiction, school projects, anything like that. So if there's something you want to show and you want to get some feedback on it, or just get some exposure, or talk to some people, just contact us at IGDA.org. We've got an email link right there, and it's also the place to go for everything. We've got a podcast there. We've got we video record our sessions if you missed one, and you can see them from there. What else? Look at your end.
Facebook, Twitter,
all sorts of things. What we're going to do is, real quickly, in the slot normally reserved for the member project, we're going to just kind of do a GDC recap. How many people went? Cool. You got any good stories you want to share? Or any wow moments, or any?
They did a really cool, the last day there was I forget the exact name of the session, but it was a game design challenge. And there were 3 participants, and they didn't know beforehand what the challenge was going to be until a couple weeks prior to the conference. It was sort of having a game be like a religion. And the guy who ended up winning actually put a game on a USB, and then it was sort of your legacy. So he passed on, and the next person's going to build upon the game, and so on and so forth. So I'm hoping I get to play Chain World, and it comes my way at some point in time. That was.
What was the name of it?
Chain World.
Okay. Cool. And so people augment the game and then hand it on. Mm-hmm. That's a good idea. I think Damien Winbeck.
Well, kind of the one interesting takeaway, there was a kind of a meme floating around at GDC this year that going to sessions at GDC was kind of like taking in a cinematic, and everything else that happened outside of the sessions was like gameplay. Let's just say there was a lot of gameplay at my GDC. So I'm a guy who skips the cutscenes anyway, right? Not the target audience. I'm all about the game, and so some of the best conversations I had were outside after sessions, and I could learn a lot about what a session was about just by talking to people afterward. And I think that was that interactivity between people. I think for me is definitely one of the reasons why I go to GDC, definitely one of the reasons why I come here. And I guess my big takeaway is that it's all about gameplay.
Okay. Well, I got you standing up. Damien's going to be our speaker next month. Do you want to just give a tiny blurb on where you're going to go?
Right, so I also spoke at GDC just last Friday, and specifically I was talking about the role and usage of footsteps, Foley, and movement sound in games. And so this idea that a lot of games are very, there's a lot of walking, a lot of running, a lot of moving around, right? And from that there's kind of come to find through an informal study I did on a cross-section of games in the industry that there's kind of an emerging aesthetic, right? And we'll talk a little bit about how different games approach the sound just aesthetically, and talk a little bit about where we've come from, where we are, and maybe some pitfalls along the road for some of the different kinds of games out there, like multiplayer, squad-based, or FPS, third-person games. So come next month and we'll talk about footsteps.
And next month we don't have anybody in the short session, so if you've got something, anything from 5 to probably let you go 15-20 minutes tops, just get in contact, IGDA.org. In the month after that, Ryan's going to be speaking, and that might end up being a field trip if we're lucky. We'll get you more details as soon as we can. I had collected a few links. If anybody has anything they want to shout out to, I'll just go through what I kind of like from GDC, which is really kind of a technical and a graphics bias. And we'll get through that quick and get Big John up here. But switch over. From what I could see anyway, a lot of the press was kind of around some of the engine stuff going on, or maybe that's just what interests me. But I noticed the UDK engine announced new terms on their Indy license. The royalties don't kick in until $50,000 now. So essentially you can kind of have a state-of-the-art engine and tool chain and get some money off of it before you have to start paying for it. That is a steep cut though, once you get there. But I guess if you're making that kind of money, that's not your biggest problem really, for an Indy. And Unity announced the Android release, which has already been used a couple times, but it's officially out now. On the top of the free version of Unity, it's $400. Does anybody know what Unity Pro? How many Unity folks we got here? John, Doug. Okay. Does anybody know what Unity Pro costs?
15.
Okay. And the Android add-on for that's a little steeper too. And then there's no royalties, right, on either of them? Is that right?
I think so. Android Basic is 400, and then the Android Pro is like 1200.
Okay. So yeah, so that's and it's kind of a different target too. They're very cross-platform, and UDK is very kind of cutting-edge graphics kind of a thing, and a few less platforms. Although I don't think this gets you the. I put in my notes iOS and Android. I don't think you get that yet. I think that's for the pros right now. But they do have some very nice-looking games on iPhone, especially. And there were some details around the 3DS, so maybe let these guys talk about that. They know a lot more about Nintendo. I know it was hacked in Japan already, and this caught my eye a lot. They're going to have Netflix streaming on it this summer. I thought that was a pretty big surprise. And free Wi-Fi at AT&T.
So that would be 3D content, you think, on Netflix?
I don't think so. I don't think they have any yet.
Yeah, it's,
Yeah.
there's going to be 3D movie trailers, and then eventually it'll be 3D content.
Okay. Another one that caught my eye is OnLive. People aren't familiar with that. They're trying to give you a very thin client that's essentially a video streaming box, and then you rent time on the game PCs in the cloud. I'm not really the target market for that because I care about the latency between my console and my TV, much less going across the internet and back to play an action game. But the thing that caught my eye was it's getting built into Vizio TVs, which they sell a lot of those these days, and they're giving away. This is one of the big marketing type multi-platform titles that's coming out right now in a couple days, and they're giving away the little box if you buy it. Oh, here's one for Damien. So Gramps. What's Gramps?
Wow, Gramps. Gramps is an algorithmic procedural music system that showed off at GDC that will be used in the new Thief 3 they're making at IDOS Montreal.
That's the first release.
That will be the first release of it. It's a tool made specifically for that. It's built on a middleware tool called Wise. It's outside of WWise, but it's his own fancy mojo for making algorithmic music, which means that he doesn't actually compose the music per se. He adds little, I guess he sprinkles in grains of instrumentation, and then they get randomly, dynamically recombined at runtime to create the game soundtrack.
Did you get to hear it?
Yes, it sounded really good for things like, moody atmosphere,
Yeah.
kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure how it's going to handle the transition to action music, but again, they could go anywhere with that. They could switch to a wave file at that point.
Is there any videos or anything online that you know of?
There are not videos online of that,
Okay.
but cool system. We'll hear it soon.
People are freaking out a lot about Battlefield 3. That's built on the Frostbite 2 engine. Got a lot of links. That's the other thing that's new. So we built a, we back last year used Google Groups for everything, and then one day our Google Group disappeared, and then we learned that Google doesn't support Google Groups. There's a Google Group for support, and it's closed. You can't submit questions. And there's no email addresses. There's a form you can fill out, and they don't answer that either. So we got done with that. So we built a new list just for conversations. We've got our invite list that we run out of Eventbrite. We're only ever going to use that for invites, so 1 or 2 emails a month kind of thing. But we wanted to have our other list going again, just conversations, free-for-alls, lots of spammy things, talking about whatever. And if you're interested in that, I don't know if you have that linked yet, but it's a discussion.
We should do a post on IGDA TC.
Okay, we'll get one up there
Yeah.
to get you to that. And I'm gonna throw all this stuff in there so you can go click on them and share them and add your own stuff that you found. But DICE is a developer that makes Battlefield, obviously, and they are very, very open and very active in kind of the academic community. I spoke about stuff I saw at SIGGRAPH 09 over a year ago now. And back then they were investigating compute shaders. So all your video cards now don't just do video anymore, they do any kind of parallel calculation. And SIGGRAPH 2010, they're doing real-time radiosity. And here, finally, they're actually showing a game, which is the big reveal at GDC. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Right at the end here. It looks pretty. You see that okay? And it's going to look quite a bit better on PCs. This is kind of their next gen kind of thing. It's going to release on 360 and PS3, but I don't have sound. I apologize for that.
Sounds overrated.
People just really kind of commented on the lighting and the good movement and so on. And this isn't pre-rendered. This is what their stuff looks like, and they were already showing this kind of thing off 2 years back. This was running on a state-of-the-art PC, of course, not your Xbox. But yeah, see that okay, or is it dim? See anybody?
It's a very bright.
Greg's got it. Thanks. So as kind of a graphics guy, the thing that strikes me is how natural the sunlight looks. How it actually looks like you're in an environment, outdoor environment. And they're breaking license to show off they can change their lighting, it's not static. In that room, they're kind of showing off some of their radiosity stuff. That's radiosity is a fancy term for light can bounce off objects and illuminate other things. It's not too much of a disservice, Scott, is it?
Oh, no.
So that's basically never done in games, reflected light.
Very, very, very traditional way of doing it. Very, very, very expensive.
And this is almost done here. Yeah, we just got a little bit left. 20 seconds. Does anybody know the release date? Is that coming out this Christmas? Is that right? Or is it a year out?
March 16th.
I knew that. So right on their website, they just published tons and tons of stuff, rendering all sorts of things, very technical things about PlayStation 3 architecture and yeah, just it's amazing stuff. It's state of the art, and they're not afraid to share, which is great. Including the stuff that I saw way back when. I had the PDF up, but this goes into more kind of a state-of-the-art game engine these days. Isn't about you have a thread for audio and you have a thread for graphics and you have a thread for input. It's about you make a billion little jobs and dice them up and prioritize them and throw them to all these different cores that you have now, including onto the GPU for stuff other than graphics. And in 09, which is a while ago now, they were experimenting with deferred lighting and actually running all the calculations on the GPU and basically getting unlimited light sources, numbers in the thousands. And those are all dynamic. Those are calculated every frame and stuff. And the way they're getting that done is with the compute shaders. So there'll be links for all this. Here's the radiosity really quick. I won't show the whole clip, but they go into the algorithm. I'll just skip to essentially the idea that light can reflect off the green wall and illuminate things green. It gives you a lot of subtle details that are just totally missing in games. And once games start doing it, you won't like the games that don't anymore. You're just used to kind of really direct lighting algorithms.
It's hard to make the distinction that it's in real time versus baking
Yeah.
the manner.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very common to bake radiosity.
The way people do it now is you fake it by painting textures.
Yeah. So here's some more examples in real time. And so this covers their algorithm and how it basically works and where it's making its approximations and so on. But it's very nice. And actually that probably segues into the other thing I like. I'll come back to Unreal. A lot of our game technologies that are kind of commonplace in games are starting to move back into the content creation software because the quality's finally getting high enough. There you go. So the ones that caught my eye, there's maybe more, but physics and the bullet physics engines, the real-time engines, are now in 3ds Max and Maya, and I don't know if they're in Softimage or not. And digital molecular matter, so Damien worked with that one on the Star Wars games. That's the one that's got all the materials and they splinter, they fracture in real time based on what they are. They bend if they're metal, and they crease like they kind of should if they're that particular material. And they'll sell that to you for I think $600 for the plugin.
Oh, really?
So it's very, very affordable, and this isn't the kind of thing that you need to throw to the render farm. You just put in your expensive video card and run it on one desktop or whatever.
We were looking at demos of it last night at the Maya user group.
Okay, yeah, you made it there, huh?
Yeah.
What else? Oh, that's a great thing to tell you guys about. If you're Maya users, we have a Maya user group in
I told
town,
all them to come to this.
and you just missed it. It was last night. But if you just Google Minnesota Maya, you can get on the email list for that. But what else from GDC?
That was probably it. No, it wasn't from GDC. They were
Okay.
just going through the 2011, 2012 Maya demo. And they were showing the physics stuff.
If this is, yeah, and if Autodesk was running live video from their booth, which is kind of cool, but then they captured all the good stuff too that they could. Some of it they're not allowed to rebroadcast. But that's another link I got for you. You can just kind of see all the new features, all the stuff they're showing off at GDC. I'll move through the rest of this real quick. This is a special interest one. I'm very interested in kind of human-computer interface interaction stuff, and they're making a PC driver for PlayStation Move, which is kind of neat. We'll see where that gets to. It's not quite the radical technology that the Kinect is, but it's kind of cool that they're supporting it directly. So we'll see if where they can really make a difference isn't in the hardware, it's in the middleware and the drivers to help you out with the math. That's very hard to do by taking a webcam and trying to extrapolate, motion and distance.
It'd be interesting to see a combination of Kinect and that. Because
Yep.
right now Kinect can't tell where your hand is
Right.
turned.
So
Get Kinect in there, have that for a sword.
and is anybody doing Kinect Homebrew stuff with the? Well, now they have an official driver, not from Microsoft, but from the manufacturer, PrimeSense. Anybody? That's something I'm fiddling with a little bit, and my project very quickly ran into the wall that you can't get much done with just your arms, other than wave your arms, and play a dancing game. So I have essentially made one of these because I don't have one. I took my Wiimote, which it uses Bluetooth, so there's been libraries since almost day one to use that on a PC, and stuck a light on the top to make it a lot easier to find, which is exactly what they're doing here. With a little more finesse because it can change color to differentiate itself from your background or something like that. And then running all the calculations to figure out where I'm holding it in 3D space. With the Kinect involved, that becomes a lot more trivial than doing it with only a webcam, which is how Sony does it. And so it'd be nice to see if their middleware helps you out with that or not. And I'm not exactly sure their motivation other than, they heard Microsoft was going to make a PC driver, and so they don't want their head to be, they want their head to be in the ring too. Speaking of Microsoft real quick, Dream Build Play is a contest for XNA. The reason I'm showing you this is if you sign up, you get a free certificate to deploy projects to your Xbox. So if you do any XNA, that's normally $100 and some a year, which also gives you the right to publish on the 360. But believe you me, there's a big distance between running on the 360 and publishing. The performance on there is not what you're going to expect, not what you're getting from your PC. The virtual machine on there is not up to par with the one that they run on the PC. So there's a lot of optimizing, and if you actually were to try to get it certified and get all your little menus and memory card in slot 2 and out of slot 1, and then somebody plugs in the drum set and it doesn't crash, you have to go through all those little hurdles. But just to play on the Xbox is wowie wow moment, and you get your 4 joysticks and show your friends, and then you play your dancing game on the Kinect. Got that one. And the last one I had, I think the last one was, I was kind of pretty wowed by the Unreal Engine demo. They're finally using the new features that have been in graphics cards for a few years. Oh shucks, it didn't preload. When was I born? 1950. I look pretty good. I'm gonna let that queue up. Show you a couple stills. So primarily the features that they're starting to use now is the tessellation on the video card. So you're not sending up every single triangle anymore. It's treating it like a subdivision surface and tessellating on the fly. So insanely dense meshes. And then you can also efficiently finally do displacement maps on the GPU also. And that requires, like a DirectX 10.1 or DirectX 11 graphics card, but they're pretty cheap these days too, relatively speaking. See if I can zoom that for you. All right. So you can't even kind of fathom the polygon densities we're talking about. It's just ridiculous. And you can kind of see these diamond shapes. That's an artifact of the subdivision algorithm. So depending on your distance, it's going to do more or less triangles. This is obviously a close-up. In theory, I think it's supposed to make it easier to do level of detail stuff. I don't know if that's true or not. But you can see kind of the detail in the displacements as well. I don't know if this is running in real time. Does anybody know if they were running in real time? You'd think they wouldn't push it too far with game developers because they kind of know what to expect and what not to. So this is the same model going through its displacement maps. And the big thing that's different about displacements instead of normal maps is the verts actually move. It's not a trick where as you get on edge it looks flat again. They actually move. They actually come out or go into the surface. Zoom out of this for a second. So you can kind of see it on the stills, and hopefully you'll be able to see it in the video. It was a pretty neat video. Let's still keep it up. Let's give it a shot anyway. So the main things they're showing in here, the subdivision, the displacement maps, and then the atmospherics and the depth of field. There's kind of a cheesy shot where they pull the focus like you're watching a Hollywood movie from foreground to background, and it's pretty effective. Let me let's try out the sound here. Just the mic maybe. Very high tech. Is that working?
You hear something?
So that's kind of subtle in the video. That was the scene there that the depth of field. Yeah. I'll show you real quick the field there. I wasn't able to see it in the video, so I don't know if you guys were able to. The difference is, the way they're doing it today is they're just kind of doing a scattered render. And if you played games that use it, it can only go so far before it really breaks. This is doing it like a camera would do it. So you're actually kind of, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, the bokeh effects and so on that are kind of, because cameras have lenses and they have apertures and you know, the iris is open for a certain fixed amount of time. So they'll actually blend streaks across as if you were filming with film. So that's what people are used to seeing from movies. So it looks quite a bit better than what's in games today. Does anybody have anything else that I didn't touch on? Big news or anything like that? Okay. Well, we'll move right on to Big John here and just give us a couple of minutes to switch over and
my name is Ken Patterson. I'm one of the Big John Games guys. Today, you know, thank you for coming to see what we've been doing. We're a small studio, but we're kind of busy. And today I'd like to go through a project we're doing in the serious games area. We're working with State on a project idea that we came up with, Stout University. So, and a project that we do a lot of stuff in the healthy area, Games for Health, and Stout is helping us carry this into an online project, and I'm really excited about it. And then Matt and AJ are going to talk about a Just Jam, which is our WiiWare product that we did with Zebco, and it's heading to lot check probably in about 2 weeks. And then finally, I've got a fishing game that we've put together, and we've built a lot of fishing games, and this is some of us in this room have helped us with those fishing games. So I'm really excited about this one. This one's really fun, and haven't had a publisher telling us what to do and what not to do. It's been more of what we want to do, and that's it. So let's get started with Stout. My classroom Stout. And I was asked to help advise on a project for the game development class, and they wanted a game idea, and Diane emailed and asked me if I had a design, and Feeding Freddy is a project we really liked. We turned it over to this group, and they have done a great job, and I'd like to let them present the project.
Hi, we're the Feeding Freddy team. My name is Josh Herbert.
I'm Jacob Potter.
I'm Dan Hyman.
I'm Tiffany Trutman. I'm Laura Davis.
I'm Landon Beachkowski.
Okay, pretty much this is what Feeding Freddy is all about. It's going to explore the effects of good and bad eating through feeding and playing with your pet, Freddy. The first stage is you're going to feed your pet. Then with that feeding, you're going to see the physical effects of different eating habits. And then you explore the physical eating habits in 3 different games.
All right, basically we're going to go with a flat kind of cartoon style game. We want it to be really appealing in appearance to the ages 8 to 13. So if they want to learn about good eating habits and something that they'll attract into it. It'll be kind of a bright color scheme, not so primary colors, really pop out at you.
These are some of the designs we had for Freddy. We chose to make him a mouse character because mice can actually eat similar things to people, and we didn't want the character to be a dog and have kids feeding it chocolate or anything. Give kids bad ideas like that. These are the more polished vector designs for Freddy. We're animating him in After Effects and Flash. This is the game flow screen. We want to just basic intro screen and buttons for how to play, the feeding screen and scores, and from the feeding screen, after you're done feeding Freddy, you can go to the games. And in the feeding mode, you're going to use drag and drop mouse controls to feed Freddy. You're going to choose foods from a slider and just drag them over and see his reaction to certain foods. So you get happy when you feed him cake, or be a little angry when you give him too much broccoli. And you can feed him until he's full. And then afterwards, it'll calculate a fitness level for him based on what you gave him to eat. And there'll be 5 fitness levels from fat to thin and healthy. And as he gets fatter, the mechanics in the game, he's going to run a lot slower and his jump height's going to decrease. We also wanted Freddy to offer little tips and comments to help kids make informed decisions about eating, and have the mechanics encourage healthy eating by forcing kids to kind of feed Freddy some high sugar, high calorie foods to give him more energy in the game, but also to balance that with low-cal, low-energy foods like vegetables and whatnot to make sure he's fit in the game.
So one of the mechanics of the game is the energy bar. As you feed Freddy, the energy bar increases. The higher calorie, the worst foods have higher energy for him. So you need to balance getting a decent energy level with a decent fitness level. And when you're playing the game, the energy level decreases as you do actions, and the fitter you are, the slower the energy bar depletes. And when it depletes, he moves really slowly.
Yeah, he burns out and just crawls through the rest of the level.
There's 2 different types of the game modes. The first is the running level or the racing level. It's just a very simple side scroller with 2 or 3 different levels, and you go from the start to the finish, jumping over obstacles as fast as you can. And the upper levels will be you'll only be able to get up there if you're a little fitter, and they'll have, say, less obstacles or a speed boost that'll help you get through the level a little faster.
In the jumping level, what you're going to do is you're going to run through it, jumping on platforms, collecting as many points as possible. They're shinies, so that little kids will be attracted to it, so they want to run towards them. There'll be different symbols, like 5 or 10 points for each symbol, and it'll pretty much be until your energy bar depletes.
The game controls are pretty simple. You use the mouse to navigate through the menus and the feeding screen. The arrow keys move left and right, up and down is to move up and down the ladders. Spacebar is jump, and then the P button is also the pause screen button.
Okay, so some of the designs for the game, these are a little rough at the moment, but this is the running level design currently. I just kind of wanted to do a big open field because it's kind of what kids really like to run around in. So, play soccer, they can kind of connect with it. And then the other one would be like a jungle gym type level, which would be the jumping level. Basically, if Freddy was too fat, he wouldn't be able to use some of the things to jump from platform to platform. We're going to add in trampolines later, and he wouldn't be able to use those. He would probably break the trampolines if he was, too fat, and then he would have to climb the ladders alternatively, which would take a lot longer than using trampolines.
And then there's scoreboards for each game, and it'll just track the player's highest score, and then also incorporated into the actual games, it'll show your highest score so you can aim to beat it while you're playing. So just to encourage kids to come back and try different combinations of food, try different fitness levels, to experiment and then work towards their best scores with the healthier Freddys. And then just for music and sound, we just wanted like little Yoshi noises, little meeps for Freddy, reactive sounds. And then for the music, we wanted something upbeat like World 1 in Mario, just something fun and upbeat, but the tempo will decrease as he gets fatter and slower, so it'll be really drawn out and just emphasize the fact that he's really drained. And that's our Feeding Freddy concept.
questions for these guys?
Are you actually the development as well? Or-
Yes.
Yeah, we're in
Yeah.
the process of it right now.
We're gonna have it on our website, it'll be at Stouts, and other groups that may wanna have it, you know, that are interested in healthy eating.
What's kind of the timeline for the whole project? How long?
We're hoping to have an alpha done in the next couple of weeks.
And how long have you been working on it? Is it tied to a class?
Yeah, it's a class we've been working on since the beginning of the semester, basically.
There was a contest for games like this about a year ago, out of the White House, no less. I don't know if they're running it again.
Call them up, tell them we got something.
What's the kind of age group?
Pardon?
What's the age group intended for this game?
8 to 13. Yeah.
8 to 13. So what is the reward for players? I mean, obviously it's educational. You want kids to understand the benefits of healthy eating, but gameplay-wise, what's the reward for playing?
The reward is that if you select and feed it Freddy properly and get him to a right fitness level, you can complete the games. If you don't get Freddy to the right fitness level with the help with the foods, then he doesn't play the games as well. So it's sort of a negative reward that the games play like crap.
And he moves really slow, and it's really discouraging for
So
the
it's not
player,
fun.
So if they get to a certain point where Freddy becomes too fat, they have to go back to the beginning of the game?
Yep, and then they go back and keep trying. I mean, you want to see your consequence. This idea is to show consequence of improper diet.
Sure.
So, yes.
Is there any use that consequence, is there any desire to go forward and show the next step of patch, like eating way too much calories and getting fat and generally being slow on trampolines?
Yes, there's
Is there like a running
this classes can only go so far before the class ends, but yeah, we want to take this farther, Freddy farther. Yes.
If the students latch on to like a really healthy food, like they see that carrots are really healthy, is it a viable strategy to just feed Freddy carrots the whole game?
No, because the energy bar is determined by what you ate previously in the feeding level, and carrots are very low energy, so you'll start off with a lot less energy. And so the mechanics are to balance how fat you are with how much energy you have. It's a simplified method for taking into account the fact that high energy foods are usually high calorie, fatty, sugary foods. So you have to feed him some fattier foods to balance out the energy and get your energy bar to start at a good level, but also keep him thin enough that he'll be able to play through the game well.
Yeah, so if you just fed him all carrots, he'd sprint through the first half of the level, and then he would just stop and move extremely slow through the end of it.
Way in the back. You had your hand up before.
Yeah, I was wondering if your target audience was going to be just Americans, because the social message you're proposing here seems to fit well with American society, but in a place like India, where malnourishment and undereating are a problem, I was going to wonder if you had considered disadvantages to too slim, but it seems you've managed to answer that in a way.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's right now we'll just worry about North America. We'll take over the world later.
I don't think the Indian kids need help maintaining their weight. It's kind of an American problem.
Does Freddy eat meat, or is he just a vegetarian?
He eats meat. Like mice can actually eat some meat and stuff, which is one of the reasons why we chose a mouse. They're actually omnivores. So we're gonna have like spaghetti and like chicken wings and stuff like that. He's kind of an anthropomorphized mouse, like Mickey Mouse or that kind of vein.
Are you going to have warning signs so that they don't feed mice in the house?
No. I think we'll move on to the next. Thank you, guys. Next up are Matt and AJ. They've been working on Just Jam for about 6 months, over 6 months now. Close to a year. Close to a year, okay. Time flies. And this is a Wii version of what Zivix has been doing on the PC. So I'll turn it over to Matt as soon as he gets his mic plugged in.
We're good. Okay. Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Matt Heinzen, lead developer for Big John Games, and I'll be discussing Just Jam, our project for WiiWare. So first of all, I'll take you through what is Just Jam. And basically it's our adaptation of Zebco's, our partner company's product, Jam Party for PC. It's our adaptation to take that game to WiiWare. So what is Jam Party? And basically to kind of summarize it in 4 kind of marketing bullet points, I would describe it as a real-time, guitar controller-based music making experience, and then the musical aspects of it are enhanced by what are called venues, which are basically environments that respond to the music and are you can see in the background of the scene. So I'll give you a little bit closer look at what Jam Party is all about. First, to kind of give you a better idea, it's kind of tough to get your head around what it is until you've actually played it, and I'll give you a demo of Just Jam, just a minute of it, so you can understand what the rest of this presentation is about. But to start out, it's not a rhythm-based game. It's not like Guitar Hero or Rock Band, where you're supposed to follow a pre-defined song and hit notes, specific notes on beat, so that to get a certain score and complete a song and move on to the next song. It's a music creation experience, but it's not a full-fledged sequencer. It doesn't give you quite the fine-grained controls that you get with a music sequencing app, where you can bring in your own tracks and organize exactly when every track starts, things like that. It really kind of falls in between on that spectrum. The player creates the music, but most of the overall sound that is created is determined by the selected jams and the music that's already pre-selected to go into that. So we feel it's a pretty fresh concept, might breathe some life into what's kind of a declining genre right now, with music games a little bit on a decline, people getting a little tired of Guitar Hero and Rock Band. So the music model that Jam Party is based around, the main component is what's called a jam. You'll hear that name a lot. Basically speaking, a jam is 25 to 125 separate music tracks, and this is the jam model that's used in the PC version, Jam Party. It's organized in what are called bank sets, and a bank set is basically 5 different instrument banks, each of a specific type of instrument, and then each of those banks has 5 tracks each. And then any individual jam will contain between 1 and 5 bank sets, which gives you the 25 to 125 separate music tracks total. And then there are 2 types of tracks that are used. There are synchronized loops, which each jam might have a certain loop length. Like it might have a loop that might have loops that repeat every 12 seconds. So with a synchronized looping track, anytime you turn it on, what you're actually doing is just unmuting a track that's already playing. It'll come in at whatever point in the loop that it's already playing at. The other type of track is called a one-shot, and that type of track will just play once when you start it, and it'll fire off at the beginning, whatever time you started at. So synchronized loops give you an easy way to create music that sounds good together, because all the loops are synchronized and are designed to work together in a jam, whereas one-shots give you a little bit more flexibility and control of how the music actually works. It gives you a chance to put in some of your own melodies, things like that. And then because of how the jam is put together, a player selects a single jam for each play session, and they can't do things like mixing and matching different tracks and jams, because it wouldn't work right. So the controls for Jam Party are based around the Guitar Hero and Rock Band guitar controllers. The thinking behind it was that there are all these controllers out there that are used for, they already exist for Guitar Hero and Rock Band, so there are probably a lot of people out there looking for new types of music experiences that they can do with those. So I'll just give you, I just brought in a basic guitar controller, and so I can just give just a quick demo of how it works. So if you imagine that, so each of these jams will have 5 different instrument banks at one time, and each of those banks will have 5 different tracks in them. So for example, if green was drums and red was, say, bass guitar, and I wanted to activate the 3rd and 4th drum and bass guitar tracks at once, all I do is I press down on the green and red fret buttons, and I do a strum up, and that would activate those banks, and it would deactivate any other banks. Then I would take the yellow and blue fret buttons, I'd press those down, and I'd strum down, and that would activate the yellow and red and blue tracks in both the drum and bass guitar banks. So it's pretty simple, and it allows for very quick transitions where you can activate and deactivate different instruments across multiple banks very quickly. So the visuals for Jam Party, like I said, they have what are called a venue. It's basically a themed graphical environment. There's all sorts of different crazy, abstract and realistic looking environments. The key is that they respond to musical events in real time. I'm going to skip over some of these details, but basically there's audio analysis that's done in Jam Party. It's pre-processed, and whatever tracks you play, the music that comes through those tracks will make things happen, like particle effects or camera motions or animations in the venue. So now I'm going to give you a little bit of a preview, a short demo of Just Jam, so that you can get a better idea of what this is all about before I go into some of the details of how we actually developed it.
There's a mute button.
There it is.
You call it just mute. Sound is overrated.
Great, we're showing a music game.
I knew it.
All right, I think that's working.
Only sounds a little loud. Listen to the radio.
Okay, so now I'm going to show you some different controls that are completely different to what I just showed you. I'm going to start with one of my favorites. Okay, so here we have basically we have a set of jam loaded called Days Go By. It's kind of a techno number. So we have 5 different instrument banks, got drums, guitar effects, voice, and some more effects. Here, the yellow ones are the looping tracks, and then here we have a set of one-shots. So in this interface, I can just toggle individual tracks in. These one-shots. Venue in the background. We'll talk about some of the specific venues later on, but you can see how these, at first there were no buildings in the background. Then as I started adding tracks, more of the buildings started popping up. They're kind of dancing to the music. The color comes in when the volume associated with the track that's paired with the building comes on. And all different venues respond to the music in different ways like that. So now I think you've seen just enough to get an idea of what it's about. We'll come back and do a little bit more demoing later. But for now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the technical development of Just Jam.
How many different control schemes are in there?
2 right now, and I'm going to talk about 4 these are the 2 we have in there, plus a couple others that we went through in development of the game. So, bringing Jam Party to WiiWare, there were basically 4 big challenges we had to overcome. Listing them really quickly, the first one was reduced footprint, the second one was reduced memory, having to develop Wii-specific controls, and then the limitations on CPU and GPU processing. So I'm going to kind of go over each of those in a little bit more detail, and then I'll move on to talking about what we had to do to solve these. So the first big one is reduced footprint. In a PC game install on DVD media, obviously you have multiple gigabytes available to install on the user's PC. WiiWare, we're only limited to 40 megabytes, which is obviously a huge reduction in what we can provide in our total download. So the biggest question, first of all, we had to answer is how many jams can we fit in the game? This is all obviously high quality audio. We use Ogg Orbis compression, but there's only so much you can compress audio, and get sufficient quality in a music game. So how many can we actually fit? And if we could only fit 4 or 5, we would have known, we can't make this into a viable product. That's not enough. So we had to answer that question: how many jams can we fit? Once we fit those, we want to have some kind of previews in the menu so people can get an idea of what each jam sounds like without actually having to go through, load it, and play it. For this, so we want to figure out, can we actually capture a little bit more audio, maybe store in some pre-recorded clips produced from each jam to use in the menus. How many menus can we store in the game? And finally, how many performances can we save? The performances, basically all save data counts against that 40 megabyte limit. Can we save enough performances that a user is going to be satisfied that they aren't going to have to start deleting performances as soon as they've actually gotten into the game? And in terms of sharing performances, Jam Party PC allows people to export to MP3s, which is obviously a great feature for a music game so that you can actually listen to your music outside of your game. We can't do that on the Wii because Nintendo is very restrictive about usage of the SD card. They don't allow people to use it for much of anything except for their own save data, because they're worried about game piracy and things like that. So there is another game on WiiWare called Mix Superstar that is more of a sequencing type application that allows people to upload saved songs to a website and then that they run, and then that website can be used to create an MP3 that you can download. But that was a little bit too much for us to take on in the time frame and with the resources that we had to deal with it. So the one thing we did think about for sharing is that we can use, each Wii remote has about 4 kilobytes of memory on it. Can we get performance data small enough to fit it onto a Wii remote so we can have some way of sharing data between different Wii consoles? Reduced memory is also a big issue. PC, I think that, I brought along the game box, but I forgot to look at it. I think that the system requirements, you can set whatever requirements you want for a PC game, and 1 gigabyte is common on PCs nowadays. So I think Jam Party requires that. We only have 88 megabytes of memory total for the Wii, and that's split across 2 different memory banks. So the big challenge is, can we fit a whole jam into memory? Because if we can't fit one whole jam into memory, no matter how much we can squeeze into that 40 megabyte download, then the game is just not going to work. And then the secondary challenge, can we fit enough for visuals after the sound uses up memory? Third big challenge is developing Wii-specific controls. Jam Party for the PC is based strongly around the third-party Guitar Hero and Rock Band controllers. Zebco is developing their own guitar controller that has some advanced features in it, but the game is based around the idea that lots of people already have these controllers out there. For us, we thought we could make that happen for WiiWare, but we talked to Nintendo about it, and they will not license WiiWare developers to use third-party peripherals. And the reason why is that they want to be able to test every possible hardware revision of every peripheral that is used with your game. And since we didn't even create the peripherals that we would like to use in the game, there's no way we can provide that or guarantee that future hardware revisions might be compatible or won't cause any kind of bugs. So we had to scale back on our expectations there and decided, can we recreate the Jam Party guitar controller experience using only the Wii remote and Mesh? And then I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but dealing with the limitations on processing power. Obviously, the Wii is not the most powerful thing. We have to manage 25 simultaneous audio tracks. There's no chance we're having enough CPU power to actually decompress the audio in real time, so we have to have it decompressed all in memory at once. We need to have enough processing power left over after audio to display our cool visuals. So that was a challenge. So looking at how we attack these challenges, the first thing is obviously audio is the most important, and we have to attack the audio problems head on. So the first big decision we made is to only use 1 bank set per jam. I noted that some jams in Jam Party had up to 125 tracks across 5 bank sets, and the way those worked is that only 25 tracks would be active at a time, but you could do one action that would switch out an entire bank set at once, and then the tracks that were playing in one bank set would be replaced seamlessly with the tracks in the new bank set. That requires everything loaded into memory at once. We knew that 25 tracks would be kind of a tight fit as it was, so 125 would be impossible, so we decided we're not going to do that. We're just going to stick with 1 bank set per jam. And then this curve beta, is there some metadata that was created at Zebco that avoided the need to do real-time audio processing Basically, I won't go too much into detail here, but basically the data was big and would have sucked up even more memory that was already kind of at a premium for us. So we decided not to go with that and decided to use what limited CPU resources we had to do what real-time audio processing was possible. Some other things we did with audio is that on the PC, it used standard 44.1 kilohertz sample rate audio. The Wii generally uses 32 kilohertz audio. It's possible to do 48 kilohertz audio, but very few games actually do that because that would take more. The size of the audio in memory is basically proportional to the time and the sample rate. So we figured if we go with 32 kilohertz, that we can cut about 30% off the size of the PC version's audio right off the bat. In other cases, there were longer loops that could be cut down. In some cases, you might have a jam that's, say, 12-second loop time, but certain tracks might actually repeat multiple times within that. You might have a drum track that actually repeats every 3 seconds. So we just could cut those loops down, and that saved us some room. In a few cases, we actually had to make more significant changes, like reducing certain tracks from stereo to mono. And in this case, there was a lot of kind of manual effort by the music guys over at Zebco to figure out what tracks sounded the best in mono, and then just reduce those, and that saved half the audio memory on those tracks. The benefit of that, or what made it not such a big drawback, is the fact that because you're still playing multiple tracks at once, and several of those tracks are in stereo, you still get a stereo experience, even if some of the tracks are mono themselves. So all these changes improve both the size in terms of file size and in terms of memory usage. Memory reduction is most critical because, like I said, if we can't fit a jam in memory, the game's never going to work. But reducing the actual file size is very important also, because the more jams we can fit into the game, obviously the better it's going to do. And we're also able to tweak the odd quality settings to get the file sizes down a little bit more. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the real-time wave data analysis. Basically, we didn't have a lot of CPU processing power, so it had to be simple. We didn't have time to do anything like fast Fourier transforms on individual blocks of sound. But we were able to make a lot of things happen in the venues just by doing either just kind of raw amplitude or just smoothing out the very noisy, kind of spiky data in raw amplitude from the tracks, just by using some rolling averages, which are one of my favorite numerical tools from working on the DS, just because they're so cheap to do, but can give pretty good results when you use, especially when you use different windows on the rolling averages. So you can have certain calculations that have pretty small windows, have quick responses to changes in the audio, good for more dramatic effects, and then other longer rolling averages can give you more gradual effects. So the results of all these changes are that we use the FMOD audio system. It needed about 50 megabytes for our audio. Found out that we needed about 40 megabytes for decompressed tracks, and then the real-time wave data capture. It's a little bit harder to track using their memory debugging tools, but we found in practice that for the largest jams, it seemed to use about 10 megabytes on top of that. We only have a few small sound effects, so the impact of those was negligible, and that used almost all of the unreserved 64 megabytes of the MEM2 bank on the Wii. There are certain Wii APIs that have to reserve some memory in MEM2, so we weren't able to use the full 64 megabytes even if we had wanted to. But fortunately, we were able to get all the jams we wanted to squeeze in. Our average jam ended up being 1.5 to 2.5 megabytes in size. Initially, we projected we should be able to get at least 10, hopefully up to 15 jams in the game. Once we actually started doing some work with the audio guys, we were able to get it down to these sizes and ended up upping our target to about 15 to 20 jams. We're going to go with 16 jams in the final product, though if we really wanted to, we could probably squeeze in up to 18. So then finally we had to decide what to do about jam previews. There are two problems in that loading a complete bank set into memory, could use up almost all the FMOD memory that we had available. But we wanted to keep these jams cached in memory even when a player exited to the menu, because say you go into you want to play a certain jam in a certain venue, you decide you want to play the same jam, but you want to come out to the menu to choose a different venue to use as your background. The load time is not huge. It's about 11, 12 seconds for a typical jam, but still it's kind of annoying. It's nice to eliminate load times whenever possible if you can. So, so there's a problem that loading in live previews would be difficult with these jams cached in memory. And then we also had to deal with the 40 megabyte download size. Any additional audio we put in, such as pre-recorded jam previews, would take up some of that and reduce the number of jams we could fit in the game. So the solution we came up with was just to pick 2 looping tracks to preview each jam. That's what you heard as soon as the game started out. In the main menus, it just randomly selects a preview and it plays it for 30 seconds and then chooses a different one. And then when you actually go to select a jam, in the menu it will give you a preview of that jam. And there's just 2 looping tracks that were picked that have kind of a fairly full sound, that don't sound too bad if they're looping over and over again. That kind of give a flavor of the entire jam with only 2 tracks. And to get the previews to fit into memory, instead of caching the entire jam, we cache 80% of it. The first 4 banks, just dump the 5th bank as we exit out to the menu, and then reload that each time, even if you go back into the same jam. So we're able to kind of balance out minimizing load times and having enough room to play previews. So now I'm going to talk about the specific controls we started out with. So the controls you saw me demo with initially are what we call a mixing board. Basically, these controls are based on, loosely based on Jam Party's mouse and keyboard controls. Even though the game was strongly based around using a guitar controller, they of course had optional controls for mouse and keyboard, and they were pretty simple. The mouse and keyboard controls, just left click would toggle the track on or off. You saw me doing that in the demo. If you wanted to have multiple tracks come on and off at one time for more sophisticated transitions, you could hold the right mouse button down, left click as many tracks as you wanted, and then release the right mouse button to have all those tracks come on at once. We deviated a little bit there, but first some of the changes to layout. I don't have a screen that shows what Jam Party's layout was, but rather than having a control interface that fills up the whole screen and that you can hide when you want to, they just had an interface that kind of goes across the bottom of the screen. They have the banks laid out all in one row, and then they have each of the tracks laid out with in a row within those banks. And so that kind of compact layout doesn't obstruct the menu. For the Wii, we couldn't really do that. The Wii pointer is not as precise as a mouse pointer, so we really needed to have a large hit area on the screen for each track. So instead of going with a linear layout, we went with this grid layout. But that also means that the mixing board takes up the whole center of the screen. And this particular image is a widescreen capture, but if on a standard 4x3 display, you'd lose even more of the sides, and the mixing board takes up most of that middle. So we did put in the option to hide the interface, but it is a drawback because you kind of have to choose between, do I want to have the controls actually visible, or do I want to hide them so that I can't make any changes, but I can at least enjoy the entire venue in front of you. And one place where we kind of deviated from the PC controls is that rather than using kind of a right mouse button style way of activating multiple tracks, we have this feature where you can tag tracks ahead of time using the plus, minus, or B buttons on the Wii remote, and then you use a gesture control to activate those all at once. So that was our first control scheme, but at Zebco they really wanted something that was closer to the guitar controls. So we came up with something called Strum. And the basic layout here is that we thought, all right, the guitar controls are basically 5 buttons and then 2 actions, a strum up and a strum down. So we don't really have a set of 5 buttons that can all be pressed comfortably on the Wii Remote and Nunchuck, but if we use the directional controls, we have 4 directions on each directional control, plus a trigger button under each index finger. If we use both the Wii, the control pad and the analog stick together, and the trigger fingers, you can select any set of 5 fret equivalents that you would want. And so so this setup basically shows a similar style of controls to the guitar, but laid out in using the directional style. So you have up, down, left, right, and a trigger button in the middle. And then to simulate to replace the strum gesture, or the strum action on the guitar, we have up and down strum gestures with either the Wii remote or nunchuck. And so at first we thought, this is great. This is functionally exactly equivalent to what can be done on a guitar. But when it came time to actually user test these things, especially when we were developing a tutorial, we found out that people were having problems. And I think the problem was that all these different directions get confusing. Compared to the guitar layout where everything's in a straight line and color-coded. If you want to do some kind of complex action, like say I wanted to activate the left and right tracks in the drums and FX banks, which are top and bottom, first I have to push up on one controller, down on the other, and then I have to swing the Wii remote up to arm those banks. And then if I wanted to select the left and right tracks, I have to push left on one controller, right on the other, and then swing down. And watching people who are not practiced with Just Jam try to go through a tutorial, asking them to do that, even when it's telling them every step of the way, now you have to press these directions. It was just hard to watch. And even after I was practiced with it, I found myself having to overthink, how do I actually make this happen? So in response to that, we thought maybe the problem is that there's too much kind of symmetry between selecting banks and selecting tracks. So we came up with what's called the ARC interface. And what the ARC interface does is you use the pointer to select your banks. And the reason we have this ARC shape is so that you can just press the A button, draw, use the cursor and sweep the cursor through the banks you want to select while avoiding the banks you don't want to select. And that made selecting banks very easy. Every time you press the A button, it resets your selection, so you don't have to do any toggling on and off. You just press the A button and sweep. And that made selecting banks really easy. Then we use directional controls, kind of similar to strum, to choose what tracks you want to activate. The problem is we kept the ARC shape for the tracks within the bank. And by doing this, what we actually did is kind of handicapped ourselves, because suddenly, in the strum interface, if I push diagonally left and down, that could actually activate the left and bottom tracks. In this, pressing left and down diagonally only selects one track. So even with two directional controls, you could only select two tracks at once. So I had to add an invert button using the C button on the nunchuck to invert your selection if you wanted to select 3, 4, or 5 tracks to activate. So that replaced kind of one problem with another, and made it, gave ARC a drawback that strum didn't have. We were able to add a couple other things though, that since we were no longer using a gesture to activate banks, we were able to add a couple other gestures that made starting tracks easier. Normally, if you start a track in a bank using a gesture, it will deactivate all the other tracks in that bank. If you have one track playing and you want to add another track, you have to select both of those tracks to play. By adding other gestures, we're able to selectively activate or deactivate tracks using a right gesture with the Wii remote or a left gesture with the nunchuck. So that was one advantage that we added with the ARC interface. But still, it wasn't quite right. So last December, we got together with Zebco. We had a big meeting between a lot of us and to try to figure out this interface problem once and for all. And what we basically ended up figuring out is that if we combined the best elements of the strum and ARC interface control schemes, then we would basically solve all the problems. And we came up with a freestyle interface. And basically the way this works is you use the cursor to select banks, just like you would in the ARC interface, but then we kept the cross layout of the tracks and the directional controls for selecting tracks within banks from the strum interface. And then we kept all 3 gesture actions from the ARC interface, so that you could either reset an entire bank in terms of what tracks you're playing, or selectively add or remove single tracks. And so everyone was pretty happy with this interface. It took a while getting to it. There were some other really disastrous interfaces we tried as experiments, but after about 6 months of work, we were able to come up with 2 interfaces. We were really happy with the mixing board and this freestyle interface. One other benefit of this freestyle interface is that because it doesn't require the use of the pointer, similar to the strum interface, is that instead of just hiding the controls, there's actually an option to minimize the controls to a much reduced size set so that you can have your controls visible, make changes to the music, but still get a mostly unobstructed view of the venue. And I can demo that in a little bit. So just briefly, squeezing in venues. With all the jams we fit into the game, we end up using about 30 megabytes for audio. Code and libraries is something like 4 or 5 megabytes, a couple more megabytes for menu graphics and layouts. That only left us about 3 or 4 megabytes total to use for venues, and we ended up sticking 6 venues in this game. So basically we have a budget of about 500K for 3D models and textures for each of our venues on average. So how did we end up coming up with venues that we think are actually pretty good looking? Well, just a couple simple techniques I'll talk about that we use in general, and then I'm going to bring AJ up here and we're going to go back to the demo and we can look at some of the venues in particular. But we made big use of instancing, just using 1 or 2 models in some of the venues and duplicating them all over the place, and then making it interesting by tying different instances to different audio tracks, so that we might have several buildings that look the same, but if different buildings are attached to different audio tracks, they're going to behave in different ways, and the overall effect is going to look pretty interesting. We made a lot of good use out of some really low-cost textures. We made a lot of use of grayscale textures that don't require a full set of color channels or can be palletized, and a lot of the color that comes into the game is coded dynamically and happens in response to programming or the audio playback. A lot of simple gradients and abstract patterns so that we avoided the need for a lot of really highly detailed, realistic textures. And then a lot of low-cost animation. We have 1 venue out of 6 that makes heavy use out of like your typical skeletal animations. But a lot of the animation we do in here is just a bunch of things like algorithmic motion paths and scaling effects, things like that happen in response to the audio. So that's a lot I've gone through, but now, so you can see a little bit more of an action, bring AJ up here. He is the artist that developed all of the venue artwork for Just Jam, and we can talk a little bit about the venues.
Oh yeah, I'm up there. Yes, when we were talking about the venues, working with 3 to 4 megabytes.
Yep.
That was fun. It revolved around coming up with actual ideas that could implement with the music, because the music had different types of variety that we couldn't use one venue because it wouldn't fit with the other venue. So.
And I'm gonna mute this here so AJ can actually hear AJ.
Oh yeah, sure. Oh, you want to show up. So we can go down the list. So the first thing was like, well, we went more for an abstract feel for everything because it seemed general. It was a good time to put my fine arts degree into play. Of course, we didn't want to go completely abstract because some people actually want to see things that they can recognize. Most of the references I got from were mostly visualizers.
I'm actually going to switch to the face now.
All right. As Matt's getting up one of the venues, I'll go over which one.
Which one do you want to start with? Which venue do you want to start with?
Music Avenue. The one that I came up with was actually based off one of my favorite groups, Chemical Brothers. The Star Guitar was one of the awesome songs that they came up with, where you looked outside a car and you'd actually start seeing different objects appear based on the beat. And so I kind of took that element where it looked like you're looking outside of a car or a bike or something, and as you start playing the music, buildings started appearing and they started bouncing around. That kind of reminded me of kind of like a Tex Avery or an old Disney cartoon where the flowers are all dancing around and say, hey, let's put them together. And I was like, bounce, baby. And they said bouncing. And I said, how are we gonna get this working correctly? So I said, okay, we need to keep it small, shrink it in there, and each model is about 400 tries, polygons. Texture-wise, most of the overall objects share the same gradient. Since we had to deal with 25 channels, I had to create 25 materials that shared the same texture, and Matt was able to control that with the volume and the lighting with the gradient. If you want to go over any of that.
Yeah, just briefly, I guess we started off with just having, you see the colors are cycling, it's a kind of a monochrome color scheme. We started off with having everything full saturation, but it wasn't really giving us the kind of contrast and dynamic appearance we wanted. we got a suggestion from Zebco to actually try coloring everything different, and it looked like an explosion in a Skittle factory. So
Yeah.
so I tried that for about 10 minutes and said, no, I'm putting it back. But so I thought, what else can we do to give us some contrast? And I thought maybe we could play around with the saturation. So the saturation of the background depends on how many different tracks are playing at once. So it started out gray, and then as you bring in more tracks, the background increases in color. And then the individual objects depend on their volume. So as they get bigger, when the volume for the track associated with that gets higher, they grow in saturation as well.
So I had to come up with a cohesive style that could bridge both of those. With you can actually see the color, but actually see some detail, and give it a little flesh to it. As for the fireflies, what can I say? It was we wanted to deal with particles. Particles, you know, everybody loves particles, right? Explosions. At first, we wanted to give some randomness, create some particles, and I did it in Maya because I use Maya as the main 3D software for everything. And it wasn't going as planned because.
I'm going to turn the volume up just a little.
Oh yeah, sure, go for it. So you can hear the
people know what's going
on. All right. So anyway, particles were not going with the music as what we planned, and Matt suggested, hey, put in code and make it more random. These particles in the front that you see are in code. The background actually isn't done in Maya because all we had was a big black background, and that was interesting. So I created an illusion of combining a couple of spheres that overlaid each other with an alpha texture, and we could actually adjust the amount of speed in code of how fast the background would move. So as the less you play, as you notice, the background will start slowing down. So we try to make a venue that maybe different people might like, as opposed to just having venues that all look the same. That was that. All right. Rock Arena. Rock Arena is an arena, or so not much of an arena, but a stage that at first started off as a scoreboard-looking background.
I'll get the scoreboard going.
We had to thank Wii Music for that idea.
The scoreboard in the background where the lights are moving around.
That scoreboard in the background was the whole screen at the time. It wasn't exactly the most entertaining thing to look at, watching spheres go back and forth. So Zebco said, hey, you want to make a stage? And I was looking at him like, oh man, stage, huh? How you gonna fit a whole stage into 4 megabytes? But magically we're able to create enough small textures, about 120 by 128 textures to share around it. And the whole stage was about 17,000 polygons total. We instanced all of the lights that you see here. All those lights are instanced, so that means it's just one light to save time and memory. And we also instanced the lights that are shooting out the rays. That was about 81 lights and 60? About 60 lights.
There's about 40 spotlights, and I don't know how many in the panel down there.
Yeah, that's 61, actually. And there's 24 speakers, and they're also instanced. And how they were placed properly is that in Maya you can create a node joints to tell where you want to locate the objects. And we did that throughout most of the other environments, so we knew where to place things properly.
How was it picking where the cameras would mount?
Yeah.
Oh, he put it
pretty random. I pre-selected 7 or 8 different camera locations, and it's just random. Every time I try to, there's one venue where where the camera actually focuses on what action is going on in the scene rather than just going around randomly. But for most of the rest of them, we found out as long as we make the whole thing look fairly interesting, it's best to just have the camera move around to locations randomly.
Yeah, then people added, they wanted to put people in here too, dancing in the background. I said, that's not going to happen anytime soon, unless they're like spooky ghosts or something. You know, you can dance in front of the screen, and that'll be the closest thing you'll get. So I was going to just think of it as a rave party with lights.
So this is the one that actually the camera focuses.
Oh, this is like a complete metamorphosis is how it started. It turned into kind of a trippy psychedelic bubble land type of venue, which at first started off with just clockwork lights rotating in a circle. In other words, it was nothing but particles. And then I came to Matt and I said, you know what, why don't we do something like Mousetrap or something with gadgets or something to make it interesting. Let's use that particle and see if you do the particles, it actually moves stuff. You create a chain reaction to make it interactive. So if a particle moves, it moves something else. He said, oh, sounds great. So we came up and I was thinking about all this steampunk stuff and gadgetry and had these brown, grayish browns, kind of like inside of a watch. It had them spinning around. That was the color scheme at the time.
It was originally called Clockworks.
Clockworks, yes. And we showed it to Zebco, and they were like, nope. And I was kind of crushed a little bit. But afterwards, we decided, hey, we're going to put some color into that. I said, okay. It's like, what kind of colors? Well, I live in Minnesota. I go to look at Legos all the time. So I get some colors, Connects, Super Soaker. And I said, okay, let's do that. And then Matt said, you know what? The particles are colorful. Everything is colorful. A little too much color. And he said, let's do bubbles. And I said, all right. And so I used the particle system that Nintendo provides, and we applied a bubble texture that was being kind of spewed out that pushed everything when we played it. Had to adjust the alpha to make it pop out better because, you know, it's hard to see bubbles, so it almost has a kind of a glass look. And I think it turned out pretty decent. And Matt actually applied some scaling effects to the gears themselves to give it kind of a goofy, happy feel for a younger audience.
Yeah, so this is a good example of basically animation effects that don't really require any storage costs, because it's all, you know, the screw rotation is just spinning along a straight line. The gears spin and scale based on the volume of the music that's also forcing out the particles. So AJ's had to give me locations for all that stuff.
Yeah, I gave him locations of how each one was tilted in a separate file. And the environment itself was everything without the gears, kind of similar to the lights. This is the neurons. Not even called neurons anymore. When we first started off with this, I was looking online because YouTube's awesome, except for the comments. And I saw some very interesting like LED cubes and stuff, and I looked at it and I said, oh wow, you know, Bart plays with the music, 3D, put that in there. And then Matt said, hey, you know, why don't we do something like maybe in the brain or something? That's how would you put it, call them?
Well, I started calling this neurons, and yeah. The idea I came up with this is that basically all these, each one of these objects is supposed to represent one neuron, but the effect of the lights that happens occurs because they're basically all networked together, so that each one touches on it, that touches at a synapse. Basically, each one of these neurons is tied to a track, just like a lot of the objects are. And when the audio comes through, it generates color, and it has its own internal color that it generates. But then that color passes along the synapses, so it kind of emanates through the network. And so if you just have like, I'll just show one thing. If I just have the drum track at the center, basically that's just one track going. It actually triggers, I think there's like 100 neurons in here, so with 25 tracks, each track is tied to like 4 different neurons scattered throughout. But then the effect that you get, it cascades through the network, and the colors combine. You know, when they meet from different places, the neurons pulse, and then we just have some kind of random camera movements.
And the general shape was a tetrahedron, so we could connect the endpoints to each other properly. And then in between that, I tried to give an organic look to it. The actual kind of velvet see-through texture with environment projection, I think, on the
Yeah, it's basically a lot of, we basically kind of took
illusion
a,
of a glass.
yeah, it basically kind of took a lighting effect that's common on the Wii and kind of did it in reverse, where on the Wii, you can't do per pixel lighting, but you can fake it pretty well by using basically a spotlight style texture for specular lighting and using light-based projection to map that on top of your model to get nice, smooth specular highlights, even though the actual geometry is not having per pixel lighting calculated. So we actually just reversed that, and instead of having a texture that's bright in the middle and dark on the outside, we took one that was dark in the middle and bright on the outside, and instead of using it as a specular highlight, we used it from the point of a light source, we used it as a viewpoint relative alpha texture, so that the alpha increased when the normals of the model are pointing perpendicular to you, but when it's pointing at you, it looks transparent. So that's how we got the kind of gelatinous appearance of that model.
This was the, I don't know what I was thinking when I came up with this, but...
No one's claimed credit for coming up with the original
it kind of evolved. I was like, man, I love the old football commercials back in the day with Budweiser talking frogs. And of course, I wasn't going to make these frogs talk, so I said, why can't we make them apparently dance? So, you know, you can't say, why don't you dance? So, this was I would have to say this is the most beast of a project, but I think it stands out from all the other ones and going into a different dynamic if people are getting tired of looking at particles. It gives it a little character of its own. I say, you know, that's some dance, like what kind of dance? I like break dance, of course. You know, you gotta be how many break dance videos they have. It had 7 animations, about 120 to 150 frames long, which on 60 frames per second, so it's about 1 to 2 seconds each, so it can stay with the beat. There's about 48 joints in the frogs. Most of the joints are probably for the mouth and the face, because apparently we can't use blend shapes with this limited amount of memory, and we wanted to save with that. The water was an interesting thing. We used Nintendo's shader as a test and made it our own with the swamp pond look. I learned something about pipeline. It's good to separate the water from the other environment, because there was an instance where we were just doing some naming joints, and it was simple naming to switch things so they could be put together correctly, because we're just relocating stuff. And unfortunately, it took 45 minutes to just switch a name on an object, because I had to re-update everything in the environment as well.
Yeah, the problem is that once you get into doing some more of the advanced material effects in Nintendo's pipeline, it's very hard to push changes to those effects upstream into Maya or 3ds Max.
Right.
You have to do them kind of directly in their tool 3D editor. So yeah, AJ would have to, if we make one change, like you said, changing the name of a joint, you have to re-export from Maya, and then, because Nintendo's tool doesn't let you rename stuff in it, unfortunately.
No, it does not.
And so we had to, you'd have to reapply all those really finicky material changes with this really kind of arcane material settings controls.
Yeah, speaking of that, the frogs themselves were having some frame rate affecting the speed of the game, and I started off with frogs about 2,000 tries and reduced them all the way down to 1,300 tries per frog in order to actually make them move. And that's after we added a special shader to give it a nice look to it, which actually forced me to reduce it even further in order to keep that nice style. As for the background you saw there, the trees in the background are actually flat images. I actually took a picture of the real models of the trees and then created a screenshot, alphaed it out like those in the background, and kind of did a 2.5D version of those trees to give it some depth. And then we kind of used the fog, since we're in a swamp, to fake it and give an illusion of stuff going into the forest and stuff.
Yeah, we were really despairing. After we got the pond itself looking pretty good, how do we actually get a background that looks nice without using a ridiculous number of poly counts? So we went with fog to start, but even then, trying to get the fog to blend out naturally without, you know, looking like a brick wall the way it did in like some of the really early 3D titles that couldn't draw anything more than 20 feet away.
Especially when the camera's rotating.
So, you know, even pushing them, you know, using actual trees would have been too many. So we had this kind of weird hack where we had a background panel, almost like a skybox, that had trees baked into it, and we were trying to blend from the real trees in the environment into those.
Yes.
And it was almost working, but not quite. And then we finally came up with this idea.
Turned out a lot better than I expected.
So I think, yeah. So that's our presentation of Just Jam. If you have any questions, I know I zoomed through my part of the presentation pretty fast because I didn't want to take too long.
You mentioned you're doing some real-time calculations on the audio that people are mixing. Volume and what else are you pulling out of that?
Basically, we take raw amplitude for each track. Then I do rolling averages. I have like 3 different rolling averages that I use based on whether I want it to be more responsive or more gradual. I did a little bit trying to work with some numerical derivatives, but they didn't really give the effect I wanted. I wanted to capture, especially with like the BubbleWorks one, I wanted to really look explosive, have the particles come out in almost an explosion when I hit a peak in the volume, like when a big drum beat came down, I really wanted a big spurt of particles to come out. The numerical derivatives didn't work out that well. I think the closest thing I ended up doing was taking 2 different moving averages and then subtracting them, so I could get which did a pretty good job of identifying at least general areas of spikes in the data. But by the time I had kind of figured that out, we were pretty well settled on how most of the audio calculations were working, so we didn't use that all that widely. So those are the main effects that we used, the main audio effects. Anything else? All right, well, thank you.
Are we a month away?
A couple weeks. Hopefully. You're saying for Logic, that's kind of a submission.
Well, you saw one of our projects that we were working on. In our studio, typically we have more than one going on. So we have Matt and AJ were very busy on Just Jam, and I actually did a project with Capstone Publishing, which is a little spotted game. We tried a little $2 game that's actually performing very well. Which is a hidden object game based on their hidden object books, like their I Spy books. We got that out. And then got busy with wanting to go back to fishing. It's like crazy. I've done 8 fishing games now. And they've sold well. So, but for a long time I didn't want to do any more fishing games, and all the fishing ideas were coming out with just like extreme violence towards fishermen and things like that. So I knew it was time to just back off of fishing for a while. So on the Nintendo side, we've been making games for a long time, you know, I think over 15, 16, 17 years. We're really Nintendo focused right now, have been for about the past 3 years. We put out some DS games with DSiWare called Pitfire Heroes and Plushies. We put out a Thorium Wars, Spot It. We even tried to make some slot machine games. We were trying to gauge to find out what kind of audience there was for casual games on the download side of Nintendo. And we thought a slot machine experience would be a good way to get a feel for how many casual gamers are on the systems. On the Wii, we worked with Chris Dillman on Mouse House. We put out fantasy slots, and now you've just seen Just Jam. So, Zach had asked if I would kind of give a little bit of state of Nintendo, especially with the fact that they're releasing this really cool 3D device at the end of the month. So I kind of put together what I knew and kind of from our perspective what things are. For Wii and WiiWare, there's 41 million Wiis. People aren't connecting in mass yet. Most of the people I talk to don't even know their Wiis can connect wirelessly to the internet and get to the store where our products are. So believe me, we ping Nintendo twice a month about that to start getting the word out. They have one measly top 20 chart on the system, and that encompasses all the games. And they do have a recommended games on the startup page, which just this week or last week they actually put Are You Feeling Lucky, and they put our slots gambling game in there, and our sales have increased by 230% for that game. So just having that little tiny blurb helps get the eyeballs. It's helping us find that audience that we knew was there, but we weren't reaching because our games tend to get buried after they've been out for a couple weeks. Nintendo Wii's have demos. They do very well, people putting out the demos. And in my opinion, I think browsing in the WiiWare store is really clumsy, and they need to redesign that whole thing. Make it more consumer friendly so they're there to purchase. DSiWare, there's what, 140 million DSs out there. Well, we only worry about the DSi and DSi XL. Basically because that's the only ones that connect to the internet and can get to the store and buy our games. Currently there's 14 million of those in use in America. There's a lot more people connecting online with those portable devices than they are with the Wii's. They have one top 20 chart. They have a recommended games at startup. It's mostly cluttered with Nintendo stuff, surprise. Recommended games, they have a top 20 chart. Also, you stay there when you're for a while and then very subjectively get kicked out. They have no demos, and browsing a store is really clunky, or whatever I typed there, clunky. Sorry. Bless you. Zach asked what it takes to become a Nintendo developer. In the old days, and believe me, that's when we got started, you needed to be a bricks and mortar studio. They won't even ship out development equipment if they know it's a home address. So you got to get an office. Step one, here's the chicken and the egg problem. You have to have created a console game. Well, geez, if you're making PC games and you haven't made any console games, how do you get to make your first console game? It's difficult because all Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo say, well, if you've made a console game, that'll make it easier for us to do it. So it's kind of their magic key to keep everybody out. You've got to demonstrate some financial stability, and you got to show that you've got some technical skills. And that's kind of the old way, and that's the way we went through. There are alternatives now. You can create an awesome game somewhere. Cave Story, World of Goo. They created great PC games. And Nintendo, they were able to get set up with Nintendo development systems, and get themselves selling. And then the quickest, boy, grab your brother who works over at EA and tell him that you want to become a developer, because the publishers can make a development studio developer in, I don't know, about 15 minutes. So it happened very quick for us on Xbox. Once Vivendi called Microsoft and said, hey, we're going to use them for an Xbox game. And I was like, wow. So come more WiiWare stuff. Every game that's made and is sold through Nintendo goes through lot check. Because if the game fails or the game has a problem, they don't call Big John Games, they call Nintendo. And so to protect themselves, they want to make sure those games are as tested out and follow the rules so completely that the phone calls are at a minimum. As Matt was talking about with Just Jam and the music software, there's a 40 meg limit. There's no getting around it as much as I tried with Nintendo to get more space. That's it. They allow to have, again, demos. They have virtual console for older games. 2 to 3 games a week are being released. Price range for Wii games are $5 to $15. And the mixture of gaming genres and price points. So I mean, there really is a smorgasbord of gamer games on there, all the way to hidden object and children's games. So it's really a diverse audience that's on the that people are downloading for finally. DSiWare stats, again, lot check. You got to make sure the game follows all Nintendo's rules, is bug-free as best we can get it, and to Nintendo's liking. There's a 16 meg limit on the DS. It's not as critical because you can get a lot of stuff on the DS into 16 meg compared to a Wii, which takes up, you've got more texture space and stuff like that. If you're going to sell your product at $2, you can't take any more space than 6 meg. If you're going to sell it at $5, you have a 12 meg limit. If it's going to be $8 and greater, you have a 16 meg limit. Again, no demos. Price range is $2 to $12. We were really happy somebody actually put a game out more expensive than Thorium Wars, so that helped us out. There's the chart that they've got is filled with free and cheap ass games. So, God, we released Thorium Wars last year, and Nintendo comes out and shoves out 5 $2 Domo games and just pushes all the good games off the chart. So I have an opinion on that. Various genres, target user age dropping. By what I mean by that is last year, in my opinion, I felt that the gamers were still downloading. And so kids that, they're not kids, but people that still like to play games, gamer type games on the DS were more popular. I think that's going down now age-wise. And it affects us when we're trying to put out games to try to identify our audience as who we can create the games for and what age range, because it's important. 3DS impact on DSi. Wow. DSi just came out. We just had the store, 18 months ago. Now we got something else that's started the end of life cycle for DS and DSi. Retail support is slowing down for DS games. So 3DS retailers can't have all that inventory on the shelves. I'm hoping and thinking that DSiWare can be an avenue to offer new contents. If retail is going to back off on that, digital downloading can certainly be a spot for people to deliver new content. And so your game might be new DSiWare, but since there's nothing coming out in retail, it might actually get a little bit more buzz. So that would be cool. And I don't know if you guys, pardon me, there's a push down effect to younger audiences as the older members grab their 3DSs. The DSi's will probably go to younger members in the family. So take that into account when you're designing games for your audience. PS1 and PS2 games still sold after new hardware was released. So I'm trying to look for historical events in the industry that can relate to a transition like this. So
PS2 games coming out.
What's that?
There's still new PS2.
There's still new PS2 games coming out. So yeah, as I read everything about the death of the DSi and all that stuff, I'm skeptical in its total truth. Nintendo spies. So Zach asked me what sells and why, and I had a good good couple beers and laugh on this one. I thought, well, hell, zombies sell, action sells, sex sells. Is this the magic formula for a sure thing? I found that. I bet you when they funded that baby, they had a sure thing winner. I love it. They'll dance for a fee, but devour you for free. So again, there isn't a really true magic formula.
It's not as good as it looks.
But there are things you can do to help your product sell. And, you know, in my opinion, I think you need to be innovative with something. Make the art innovative. Make the gameplay innovative. Make it something new, something interesting. Not completely derivative, but take something and make it a little bit more interesting. Make the controls extremely tight. And after you get going on it, is it fun to play? If it's no fun to play, then it's probably not going to do very well. Make the goal system clear and understandable so people don't just feel like they're totally lost. Provide entertainment. Game makers, you've got to understand that we are entertainment people. And so you're creating entertainment. So is it entertaining? Nintendo said this, but I actually get it. I'll buy into the Kool-Aid on this one. But provides for some surprises. Make it, make some things happen that you weren't expecting. And hopefully they're pleasant things, but maybe not pleasant, but something cool. But, if you're going to do something, capture the experience and make sure you're translating it to the player. And then lastly, for us studios that are just getting into this publishing thing, back in the old days, we used to refer to marketing people as marketing pukes and things like that. Don't bother us technical people. That's beneath us. Brother, you need to embrace marketing. You've got to make sure that your product is getting marketed, and you have to think with that from the start of your product all the way to finish. And guess what? When you're done with the game, you're not done. You got to make sure it sells and pulls through the channel. Something that's really important is, who is your audience? Who are they? Understand the audience. What games and experiences do they like? So try extremely hard to understand who is buying the video games on the device you're creating for. And what audience do you want to go for? And if you can really get smart and find an underserved audience, all the better. So, the download audience. So, we sat around and we looked at the NPD data. That's the data that shows all the products they're selling at retail. And you could kind of synthesize through that and go, oh, okay, these games are selling really good. This is this type of genre, blah, blah, blah. When it's time to make that same game for download, we were thinking that, well, that would translate well. It doesn't. Moms buy a lot of Wii software, but do moms download? And that became kind of an ouch. So we learned that. Who downloads games? Different than who buys retail games. Nintendo kept putting us onto this thing, this whole 5 to 95 rule. It's great. There's a 75? 95. 95, yeah. So these guys aren't going to download my games. So who is downloading? Early adopters, gamers, former gamers, and it's, besides my previous rant, moms are starting to download a little bit more with the help of smart children or husbands and things like that, or just technical moms. They're getting better. And you know what? People are looking in this economy. People are looking to save some money and still get new content. That's never going to go away. By the way, in this picture, do you think this guy knows that there's no ball actually going to come? 3DS effect. One more time. It's generating tons of excitement for Nintendo handhelds. For us, it's slowed down DS sales. Retailers are stocking less DS games. Downloading seems to be unaffected so far. Our numbers are not being drastically affected by this that I can see in any sort of trend. 3DS is bringing back core gamers, which means that the core gamers that have DSIs are probably putting them down or setting them or moving them to others. eShop looks dynamite. It looks like it's going to be a huge improvement for downloads. I'm excited about that. In the eShop, you can purchase DSiWare games and play them on your 3DS. Bravo, yes. And 3DSiWare has increased download support by Nintendo. Nintendo's actually starting to put some marketing people behind digital downloading. We're getting more support staff. We don't feel quite as out in left field. So it's getting better, and I think this is part of it, or the downloading capabilities of 3DS, other than all the other cool stuff, shows that Nintendo's starting to get the picture. Bass fishing. Big Bass Arcade, We Know Fishing. With all these games that we've made, again, some of you in this room have helped put out these games. These games have sold over 1 million units. These arcade incarnations and also been repackaged and rebundled into different stuff. So, again, I guess I know fishing. So, got kind of excited, got the feeling that with a lot of the good technology and art support that we had at the studio, that we could actually put a fishing game on the DS. And of course, I will say it's the best experience on the DS or DSi, period, for fishing. So not a lot of competition, but dang it, I'm going to be the best at something. So I think this is the last slide. I'll get to the demo. Oh, pardon me. There we go. One more slide. We have 7 lakes. We're able to get 7 lakes in, 9 lure types, 3 different tournaments, 42 different events, and of course you have to find the 1 world record bass. And it all fits in less than 6 meg. So.
How hard did they get the world record?
What's that?
How hard is it to get?
It's really easy.
Okay.
It's really easy, boy. You know, if you ever learn anything in game design, go play NBA Jam. How easy is it to make a 3-point shot? So, yeah, you can definitely catch a world record bass. I will not deny you that.
Are those modeled on real world lakes, or are they just fabricated?
They're fabricated except Lake Calhoun. I put Lake Calhoun in there.
You didn't have to do any licensing for any of like the lures or tournaments or anything?
No, they're generic. They're crankbaits. They're plastics. So they're very generic. So I hope I don't get sued, but I haven't so far. So you push source. So should I try volume again?
Yeah, I think that volume's okay. Mute at the top.
Is this the one mutes at the top?
Yeah. Oh, that's one.
Okay. Well, I think I finally found a place that has more remotes than I do at home.
Is it playing music or not?
It should. Yeah, here it comes. I don't have an awful lot of cable here, so I'm going to have to kind of do this in a hunched over mode.
Like Jared?
No, I'll hunch. Can everybody hear me while I'm talking into the floor?
Yes.
Okay.
Sure.
Let's see. With fishing, you can. The DS doesn't give you a heck of a lot of space for creating buttons and options And creating option screens are a pain because you kind of have to home grow them yourself. So I try to stuff as much stuff on a screen as possible. Pardon me. But for example, for each lake, for the whole game, we keep track of the stats. You know, for today's testing, I caught 11 bass, total pounds 61, almost 60 pounds. I've unlocked only 3 of 7 lakes, and I've only unlocked 3 of 9 lures. So I've got more work to do. The first screen, the player picks whether they want to just free fish. Free fish is just go in and just fish to your heart's content. Catch everything you want. And over here we have the cups. And the first one's open, the next 2 are locked. And we have the 5-minute, see how many see if you can catch 5 bass in 6 minutes. And it's basically catch them all. As in there's only 5 bass in the lake, so go get them. I did this golden bass thing. Ever gone bowling and got like that magic pin or whatever? Am I the only one that did that? It's in a dream. So I made a golden bass. And so there's 4 dud bass, and then there's 1 golden bass, and that's the only bass that counts. So you have to go after that bass. Then I did a series of timed events. How many bass can you catch in 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 8 minutes, 10 minutes? So free fish.
Time for a quick fish trip.
So for trophy bass, I was fortunate enough to get sound effects from this really great voice talent down at the Auburn Sound Network. And we're reusing some of his audio because I just like his voice. This music was actually also in the original trophy bass also. So, there's 2 ways you can fish. I really wanted to make the fishing experience feel like you were doing something, so with the touch screen, I set it up that you could actually just use your stylus on a reel, and then you do this motion to reel in, and move back and forth with your stylus to move your rod back and forth. I love that way. I really feel like I'm fishing. And we also put in the way we can use the buttons and reel in with the buttons on a standard console type game. So. At the beginning, we throw out some high scores. Lake. There are your 5 fish. I made them red just to make them stand out so you can aim and you can move your boat back and forth. So we'll go for this guy over here. He looks like a big one. And then so you take the bottom screen and I pull down on the reel. There's a little cast meter, kind of all that Tiger Woods. You fish, your lure goes in, so you start moving around at reels. And a crankbait, the way it works is if you put pressure on it, it dives down, and when you release the pressure, it floats back up. So, that's some really nice planet fish. Now you can jig. Minnows, they don't count. And I came up empty. Died. Alright, let's go where there's a bunch of them. Look here. Alright, we got one coming. Another one coming. Yeah, now they're pissed. Come on! Bite me! So I set the hook, and now you get the action. cast, the fun that we wanted to put into it was that whole reeling exercise. If you notice, there was a tension meter. If you reel too fast and you don't follow the commands at the end, your line breaks and the fish gets away. So, again, remember this is a little $120 3D device, and I think we've really pushed it really well. I'm kind of really happy with this game. So, and you'll see it on DSiWare in a couple months. And we're going to charge a whole awful $5 for it. So, I think that's it. Any questions? Yes?
Why did you decide to have the fish right there, obvious, easy to see, as opposed to say having like a rudimentary, depth finder, sonar, to kind of keep?
Oh, you mean where you look for it?
Well, when you're sitting on the boat, you can see 5 or 6 fish just out there.
Yeah. Because I think it made it fit the gameplay better than the looking at a sonar or whatever. I think it. One of the things I'm trying to do is have this appeal to people. There's about 40 million people that like to fish, and hopefully enough of them are involved with DSs, DSIs, everything. But I also want to kind of grab at what's left of the people that don't fish and bring them over to this experience. So I thought that would be more easy they could see their targets. And it worked there's a game called Sega Bass. It worked very well in Sega Bass. So, yes, anyone?
Can you change your prices? I know you mentioned throwing more, you put it out for $10 was it?
Yep.
Do you actually get the option of changing your prices ever?
No.
No?
No. Another letter to Nintendo. So, they won't let us change.
Do you know if they're having any idea, like, where they do discount sales or something for a couple weeks or anything like that? Kind of like the Steam model or anything?
Let's see what happens in the eShop. In the current shop, they don't. But in the eShop, I think they're going to be a little bit more aggressive. They certainly hear the iPhone and iPad stuff coming at them. They need to react.
What platform was the Sega game on?
It was on the Dreamcast first, and then it was on PlayStation 2, and PCs, on the Wii. It's on Wii.
So you're not actually competing with that particular game on?
There's some similarities to it.
Right.
But yeah, I would. I'm competing against any fishing game.
No, I mean just on the same platform.
No, there's very few fishing games. I think Activision has a Rapala game, but I think they don't go into underwater and as much with the fish and everything. So we thought we'd give that a try and see what we could come up with, and it turned out really well.
You kind of have testing groups or anything, or how do you get this? How do you know if it's easy or hard? Or?
How do we know it's easy or hard? That's a great question, because we get kind of good at playing our own games, which is also balanced by we get sick of playing our own games, so you try to rush through them. But we have, the people, AJ's played it, Matt's tested it, or played it. I have a QA person at the office that plays it. Our artist in Germany played it. AJ took it home to his family. I took it next door to the next office over to a guy that just bought a $20,000 bass boat, and he played it for a half hour and really enjoyed it. So we do bring feedback in, but we're doing it through the Buddy Network, I guess, through internally and through that. So.
I was wondering if you're going to do any special marketing in fishing websites or magazines or.
We're getting smarter on marketing. Good question. We're Nintendo Life. I don't know if you've ever been to NintendoLife.com. They're going to run a contest for us. I had an idea of people sending in their favorite fishing pictures, and so we're not up to handling it on our website ourselves. They can do that. So people are going to send in fishing pictures. Nintendo Life will get a chance to get more emails and stuff like that. And then we'll do a sweepstakes of 5 people and hand out $20 WiiWare, DSiWare certificates. So it'll be $100 in prizes. But Nintendo Life will do the contest for free. So we're getting smarter a little bit more of that. It would be good to reach out to fishing enthusiast magazines and stuff like that too. Yeah. Right now we're kind of working within our own little neighborhood, the people that do follow the digital download products. So I will expand that out.
You didn't maybe just do a giveaway on some websites or something, you know, just, is there certificates you can do giveaways? Download codes or something like that?
There are download codes, and I have not used those yet. We were getting started with something with Europe when we released Thorium in Europe, but they required us to buy just a boatload of them. So it was like, for the 8 people I wanted to hand them out, I didn't want to have 50 more download codes because I have to pay for those. So we'll see. The Nintendo that I've been talking to for the past 3 months is much more interested in helping promote games, download games. So we'll see.
How long did it take to develop this, and how many people?
I was the programmer, and our artist was in Germany, Florian, and I started this in October. So what, 3 months, 6 months?
Full-time, part-time? I'm assuming you're interacting with these other gamers.
You know, I wish I could say I'm full-time, but I'm doing a lot at the office, so it's 3/4 time programming. So I work more than 40 hours. So. Does it look like FLW or?
Exactly.
Huh? Exactly.
There are things I'm missing.
So. Any other questions?
Looking ahead to having to start moving on to the 3DS, what's that going to be like, you think? I mean, is there a lot of, in terms of like your invested learning or your expertise that you guys have gotten on the DS and the DSi, is a lot of it starting from scratch and learning new tech, or is a lot of it
I hope not.
stay the same? Or
I don't have a great answer for that, but we do have a lot of invested tech on the Wii and the DS. I hope a lot of it translates over.
Let me say, I hope,
Yeah.
I'm going to disagree on the graphics architecture there. I hope.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that the graphics architecture on 3DS is a lot different than the Wii. I really hope so because the Wii's graphics architecture is what, 8-9 years old right now, and it's not based on even normal programmable shaders. So everything I've read about, we don't have access to 3DS dev-kits or APIs yet. We're expecting that pretty soon, but everything I've read about what existing publishers have done with it, it sounds like a much more traditional shader-based architecture, which I'm looking forward to working with compared to what we have on the Wii.
So good point. Hopefully we can reuse our tech and get our cake and eat it too, and really get a much better, more robust hardware platform to work on.
do you pretty much have to conceive of anything on the 3DS in a stereoscopic sense?
I don't know.
Have to have that element to it?
As a requirement? You mean?
No.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I mean, Nintendo's doesn't usually go out about requiring certain features to be used, but they definitely appreciate it, and especially for early launch titles, they want to put an emphasis on it. But no, I don't think it'd be a requirement. I don't think many games would. I guess most games would probably want to use it, I would expect.
There's other things that Nintendo wants you to take advantage of on the 3DS than just the 3D. So when game ideas are being submitted for concept stuff, if your gig is just to do 3D, they're not as apt to be happy about that. If you take advantage of Street Pass, or if you take advantage of the cameras, or you take advantage of the gyroscope that's in it, so you can move around like this, they want to hear that. Take advantage of the different things they put into it. Then that helps them, get a little bit more comfortable with the product you're going to put on the device.
Can you still connect the 3DS to a Wii, just like the original DS and DSi?
I don't know. I would assume
Not many developers used it, but you could somehow connect the DS to a Wii, as in the Guitar Hero World Tour. for people with a DS to play a little mini game during battles to disrupt other players.
There's a communications library link to do that. We haven't used it yet.
I would assume it would be possible just because of the fact that it's totally backwards compatible with the DS, so I would think they would have, and they've really emphasized a lot more of the online capabilities, so it'd be hard to imagine that it wouldn't be able to do that, I guess.
Well, thank you.
Thanks to Big John and Stout, and thanks all you guys for coming. Right back here, second Wednesday of next month for Damien's talk, and like I said, we're still looking for that 5 to 20 minute opener. Tonight, afterwards, I got to push you out of here pretty quick. We're a little bit over on time, but there's a bunch of people going over to Joe Sensors, which is north. I'm gonna get it right, Scott. It's north and then west on 494. You exit on France, and it's on a frontage road just south of 494. American.